What if I told you that Rome's greatest weapon was not the sword or the shield, but sleep? We are used to seeing legionnaires as iron soldiers marching tirelessly across continents, but their strength was based not only on discipline and weapons. Rome's true power lay in its ability to recover, even in sleep. Each legionary camp was arranged like a miniature city: straight streets, guard posts, a strict distribution of tents, and silence, as if before a storm. Soldiers slept on a schedule, in identical conditions, under leather shelters that protected them from wind and rain. Even rest was subject to strategy for the Romans. Sleep was not a weakness, but part of the military machine. Watch the video to the end to find out how an ordinary soldier's cloak could be turned into a means of heating and camouflage, why nighttime discipline in the camp was considered sacred, and how this ideal order in sleep allowed Rome to control half the world. What I am about to show you turns our entire understanding of the Roman military machine upside down. We are used to thinking that legionnaires were forged from iron and endurance, capable of going without sleep for days on end, but the truth is much more interesting and pragmatic. Roman commanders such as Caesar and Trajan understood a fundamental truth. A tired soldier is a bad soldier, vulnerable to ambushes and mistakes. Therefore, the entire logistics of the march were built not around the battle, but around the next night's lodging. The strength of the legion was restored every night in a precise, ritualistic order. This system was not just a good idea, it was an ironclad law. Every legionnaire knew that after an exhausting day's march, he would not find a chaotic encampment, but an organized camp. This certainty was a huge psychological advantage over their opponents. The tribes that Rome fought often relied on surprise night attacks, but the Roman camp was designed to make this tactic an extremely risky undertaking for the attackers. The uniqueness of this approach was that rest was not considered a luxury, but part of the combat mission. Soldiers were not simply entitled to sleep, they were required to rest in order to be fully combat ready the next day. This philosophy permeated the entire army structure, from the high command to the last recruit. Rejecting this system would be tantamount to refusing to clean one's weapons. Commanders understood that battles are won with fresh legs and a clear mind. While Rome's enemies often slept in fits and starts, in unprepared places, the Roman army carried its rest system with it. The camp was a portable fortress that guaranteed safe sleep. Every soldier contributed to this security by working on the construction of fortifications. It was a collective responsibility that brought collective benefits. Soldiers dug trenches not for their centurions, but for themselves so they could sleep peacefully. Roman soldiers were professionals, and their professionalism was measured not only by their skill with a sword, but also by their discipline. Discipline required restoration. Therefore, nighttime sleep was as regulated a process as marching. There was a strict curfew, clear guard changes, and a clear understanding of the importance of silence in the camp. Violations of this order were severely punished as they jeopardized the combat readiness of the entire unit. Let's look at it from another angle. An army that does not sleep cannot fight for long. The Romans planned their campaigns years in advance. They could not afford to burn out in the first skirmish. Systematic rest was an investment in the long-term endurance of the legions. It was this endurance, and not just tactical genius, that allowed them to conquer vast territories. They simply outlasted their enemies, who wore themselves out sooner. This philosophy was perfected to the point of automatism. Soldiers were so accustomed to this cycle of march camp sleep that they could perform it under any conditions. Whether it was raining in Britain or the sun was beating down in Syria, the ritual remained the same. This predictability reduced stress and gave the soldiers psychological stability. They knew that in the chaos of war, there was an island of order, their night camp. In essence, the Roman army was the first to understand the importance of the psychophysical recovery of personnel. This was not humanism in the modern sense, but a cold and pragmatic calculation. The effectiveness of a soldier was a resource that needed to be preserved and replenished. Every hour of sleep was as much a contribution to victory as every sharpened sword. The enemy may have outnumbered them, but the Romans surpassed them in the organization of rest. Modern armies pay great attention to sleep and wake cycles, but the Romans discovered this principle 2,000 years ago. They intuitively or empirically understood what science has now proven. A rested brain makes better decisions, and a rested body reacts faster. Every legionnaire who fell asleep in his tent was part of this recovery system. The Roman approach to rest was as revolutionary as their combat tactics. It was a system that ensured recovery on an industrial scale. What do you think was more important for a soldier? A strong shield or a guaranteed 8 hours of sleep? Share your opinion in the comments, and be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next studies. Are you ready to learn the truth about how the Romans built a fortress in just 3 hours? Every time the Roman army stopped for the night, even for just one night, it erected a fully fortified camp known as a castrum. This was not improvisation, it was standard operating procedure. Whether they were in peaceful Gaul or hostile Parthia, the ritual was the same. The soldiers did not eat or sleep until the camp was fully secured. This rule was carved into the very heart of Roman military doctrine. The process began while still on the march. Scouts and special engineers called grammatici were sent ahead. They chose a suitable location for the camp, usually on high ground and near a water source. Using a special tool, a gramma, they marked out a perfect rectangle on the ground. They determined the location of the main streets, the praetorium for the commander, and the places for each cohort in centuria. By the time the main army arrived, the camp plan was already ready. As soon as the legions arrived at the site, work began. The soldiers were divided into two groups. One part, fully armed, stood in combat formation, ready to repel any sudden attack. The other part, putting aside their shields but leaving their swords on their belts, took up shovels, pickaxes, and axes. These tools, known as delabra, were as much a part of their equipment as their weapons. The work proceeded with incredible speed and coordination. First, the soldiers dug a trench or fossa. The depth and width of the trench could vary depending on the perceived threat, but it was always impressive. The earth from the trench was not simply thrown away, but carefully laid on the inside, forming a rampart or agger. This rampart was a serious obstacle in itself. The soldiers worked in sections, with each centuria responsible for its own section, which created an element of competition. A palisade, a vallum, was erected on top of the earthen rampart. Each legionnaire carried 2 or 3 pointed stakes, sudis. These stakes were quickly driven into the ground, intertwined, and formed a solid, impenetrable wall. As a result, in just a few hours, a fortress protected by a moat, a rampart, and a palisade would spring up out of nowhere. It was practically impossible to overcome such defenses on the fly. Inside, the camp was a model of order. It was divided into quarters by 2 main streets, Via Principalis and Via Praetoria. Each unit knew its exact location. Tents were set up in rows like houses on city streets. This eliminated confusion and allowed any soldier to instantly find his place in the ranks in case of an alarm. In the center was the commander's tent and an altar for sacrifices. The camp had 4 gates, one on each side. They were protected by additional fortifications and strictly guarded. The presence of 4 gates allowed the army to quickly leave the camp for formation or counterattack in any direction. The entire layout was thought out to the smallest detail and remained unchanged for centuries. A soldier from Caesar's legion would have felt at home in Trajan's camp. At night, the camp became an island of light and order in the middle of the wilderness. Guards were posted around the perimeter of the rampart. Patrols regularly circled the territory. Any attempt by the enemy to approach unnoticed was doomed to failure. It was this collective security that allowed the soldiers to sleep peacefully. They rested, knowing that their sleep was guarded by thousands of comrades in impregnable fortifications. This system also had a huge psychological impact on the enemy. Imagine an army that builds a new fortified city every day, and then abandons it in the morning and moves on. This demonstrated an incredible level of discipline, engineering skill, and resources. The enemy understood that they were not dealing with an ordinary army, but with a civilization on the march. Thus, the castrum was not just a place to sleep, but a microcosm of Rome that could be transported anywhere in the world. It was a symbol of order, discipline, and security. But what happened inside those walls? How did the simplest soldier live and sleep? What you will learn in the next chapter will forever change your perception of soldierly friendship, because 8 of them slept in a tiny tent. I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of the Roman barracks, the secret of the 8 comrades. Inside the mighty walls of the camp, life was divided into tiny cells. The basis of the Roman army was not the centuria or the legion, but the contubernium. It was a group of 8 men who lived, ate, fought, and most importantly, slept together. These 8 soldiers shared one tent, one mule to carry it, and one pot for cooking. They were closer than brothers, bound together by their shared daily life. The uniqueness of this system lay in its social dynamics. Imagine 8 adult men in a confined space made of goatskin, measuring only 3 by 3 meters. Every evening, they returned to this shared home. There was no room for personal space or privacy. This required an incredible level of discipline and tolerance towards each other. The soldiers had to agree on who would cook, who would clean the equipment, and who would look after the mule. The contubernium tent was the center of their universe on the march. It was called a papilio, meaning butterfly, possibly because of the shape of its entrance. It consisted of several pieces of tanned leather, usually goat or calf, sewn together. The leather was durable, waterproof, and relatively light. The entire structure weighed about 20 kilograms and was supported by a central pole and corner posts. The interior of the tent was cramped. Soldiers slept on the ground, laying their cloaks or straw and leaves they had brought with them under themselves. In the center, if the rules allowed, there could be a small hearth for warmth, but more often they cooked outside. Personal belongings, sarcina, which each soldier carried with him, were stored at the entrance or under his head. Sleeping in such conditions was a collective experience. Sounds and smells were an integral part of this life. 8 tired men, their clothes wet from the march, the smell of leather armor, sweat, and food being prepared. All of this mingled in the cramped space. At night, they heard each other's breathing, snoring, and talking in their sleep. This created an incredible sense of camaraderie. These people knew everything about each other. This closeness was both a strength and a weakness. On the one hand, it fostered camaraderie, which was vital in battle. A soldier fought not so much for Rome as for the 7 guys he shared a tent with. He knew they would cover his back, just as he would cover theirs. This interdependence was the foundation of the legion's fighting spirit. On the other hand, conflicts in such a small group were inevitable. Different personalities, habits, and backgrounds could all be sources of friction. Therefore, there was an informal hierarchy in the contubernium. Usually, there was a senior member, the decanus, who was responsible for maintaining order, assigning duties, and resolving disputes. He was an informal leader, supported by the authority of the centurion. During sleep in the tent, someone was always awake. Of course, not inside, but outside, on the common rampart of the camp. But the members of the contubernium also took turns being responsible for the safety of the common property. The mule that carried the tent and the hand mill for grain was a vital asset. It had to be fed, watered, and guarded. Losing the mule meant that the 8 soldiers would have to carry the heavy tent themselves. This system was ingenious in its simplicity. It made each soldier responsible for his comrades. It transformed the anonymous mass of the army into a network of small, cohesive cells. When a legionnaire went to sleep, he was surrounded not by strangers, but by his second family. This sense of belonging and security was invaluable. Imagine this scene. Outside the camp, the wind howls and the enemy shouts, while inside the cramped leather tent, 8 men lie together. They share the latest news, tell stories, complain about the centurion, and fall asleep. They sleep the deep sleep of tired men, confident that their comrades will not let them down. This social engineering was no less important than military engineering. If you like how we reveal these little-known details of everyday life, don't forget to like this video, and be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new videos where we talk about ancient Rome. Want to know the secret that made the Roman army truly mobile? It was not only the endurance of the soldiers, but also their tents. The Roman tent, papilio, was a marvel of engineering and logistics. It was strong enough to withstand bad weather and light enough to be carried by a single mule. This leather house was standard equipment for every contubernium. The main material used to make tents was leather, most often calf skin or goat skin. Unlike fabric, leather was much stronger and more durable. It did not rot from dampness as quickly and provided excellent protection from rain and wind. Of course, leather tents were heavier than fabric ones, but their reliability in long campaigns made up for this disadvantage. The manufacturing process was laborious. Animal skins were carefully processed, tanned, and sewn together with strong wax threads. Special attention was paid to the seams to ensure they did not leak. Leather panels were often sewn together with overlapping seams. Over time, smoke from campfires and weather conditions caused the leather to become dark, stiff, and virtually impenetrable. A standard tent had a square base, approximately 3 by 3 meters. One vertical pole was installed in the center, and 4 shorter poles were installed at the corners. The entire structure was stretched using ropes and wooden pegs. This simple shape was wind-resistant and provided maximum interior space with minimum weight. The entrance usually consisted of 2 flaps that could be fastened or tied. The logistics were thought out to the smallest detail. The tent, its poles, pegs, and ropes were carried by a single mule, which was attached to the contubernium. Along with the tent, the mule also carried other common equipment, a hand mill for grain, a kettle, and provisions for several days. Caring for this animal was one of the main responsibilities of the 8 soldiers. The process of setting up the tent was perfected to the point of automatism. As soon as the camp was marked out, the soldiers brought the mule to its place, unloaded it, and in a matter of minutes erected their leather home. Everyone knew their task. 1 held the pole, 2 stretched the canvas, and the rest drove in the stakes. This coordination allowed thousands of soldiers to set up their living quarters incredibly quickly. The interior of the tent was ascetic but functional. There was no floor as such. The soldiers slept directly on the ground. In cold regions, such as Germany or Britain, they insulated the floor. Soldiers gathered straw, dry leaves, ferns, or fir branches, and made a thick bedding. This bedding not only kept them warm, but also protected them from moisture coming from the ground. Sleeping in such a tent was a unique experience. The leather did not allow water or air to pass through. It quickly became stuffy inside and odors accumulated. In rainy weather, the tent became a refuge. But in hot weather, soldiers probably preferred to sleep outside, using the tent only for storage. However, in troubled regions, the order was to sleep inside, under protection. The leather tent was not just a shelter, it was a symbol of home. Wherever fate took a legionnaire, he knew that in the evening, a familiar refuge awaited him. It was his personal, or rather, collective space in a huge military machine. This stability was important for the morale of an army that spent years, even decades, on campaigns. When a tent wore out, it was repaired. The soldiers themselves were shoemakers and saddlers. They patched holes, replaced worn areas, and greased the leather to prevent it from cracking. The tent was a valuable asset, and its condition was carefully monitored. In the next chapter, we will talk about how soldiers protected themselves from the cold when one tent was not enough. Roman soldiers on the march were versatile, and their clothing was no exception. One of the most important pieces of equipment was the cloak. It protected against rain and wind during the day and turned into a warm blanket at night. There were several types of cloaks, but 2 were most common, the sagum and the pinula. The choice of cloak often depended on the era and location of the legionnaire's service. The sagum was a simple rectangular piece of thick woolen fabric. It was fastened on one shoulder, usually the right, with a fibula, a special brooch-like clasp. This left the right hand free to carry weapons. The sagum was heavy, dense, and provided excellent protection. It was worn over armor during marches in bad weather. At night, the sagum became a universal blanket. Legionnaires could wrap themselves in it when they went to sleep. The wool used to make the cloaks was not ordinary. It was coarse, not always dyed, and most importantly, contained a large amount of natural lanolin. This animal fat made the fabric virtually waterproof and very warm. Even if the cloak got wet on the outside, it remained relatively dry on the inside. Another common type of cloak was the pinula. It was a later and perhaps more comfortable version. The pinula was semicircular or oval in shape with a hole for the head in the middle. It resembled a modern poncho and often had a hood to protect the head. The pinula covered the soldier on all sides, which was very convenient in heavy rain or snow. At night, the pinula also served as a blanket. Its hood could be used as a pillow if stuffed with straw or soft items. Since the panella was one piece, it retained heat better than the sagum, which could open up. Soldiers sleeping in a cramped contubernium tent covered themselves with their cloaks, creating a multi-layered protection from the cold. The quality of the wool was of great importance. The army was the largest consumer of textiles in the empire. There were entire regions that specialized in the production of soldiers' cloaks. The wool was thick, felted, and able to withstand years of harsh use. The color of the cloak was usually natural, from cream to dark brown, although some sources mention red cloaks for ceremonial occasions. Soldiers took care of their cloaks as they did their weapons. They cleaned them, dried them by the fire, and patched holes. Losing a cloak was a serious problem, especially in the northern provinces. In the cold climate of Britain or Germany, a cloak was not just clothing, but a means of survival. Sleeping without warm shelter on the frozen ground could quickly put a soldier out of action. The cloak was a multifunctional item. It could be used as a mat on the ground. It could be stretched between two spears to create temporary shelter from the sun or rain. Several cloaks tied together could be used to carry a wounded comrade. This versatility was typical of Roman equipment. When a soldier went to sleep, he first spread part of his cloak on a straw mat. Then he lay down, covering his legs and body with the other half. If it was very cold, he could sleep without taking off his tunic and other clothes. 8 men sleeping side by side in a tent provided additional warmth to each other with their body heat. Thus, a simple woolen cloak was one of the most important survival technologies for a Roman soldier. It was an example of how a simple but high-quality item could perform many functions. During the day, it was armor against the weather, and at night, it was a fortress against the cold. This simplicity and effectiveness were the key to the success of the legions. What if I told you that a legionnaire's main defensive weapon could turn into his bedroom? Of course, sleeping in a fortified camp was the norm, but war is war. There were situations when the army did not have time to build a castrum. This could be due to forced marches, sudden clashes with the enemy, or special missions. In such cases, soldiers had to spend the night sub pellibus, that is, under the skins of their tents, but without the protection of the rampart, or even under the open sky. In such improvised camps, personal equipment came to the fore, and here the versatility of Roman equipment was fully demonstrated. The famous Roman shield, the scutum, was not just a means of protection in battle. Its curved, rectangular, or oval shape made it an ideal temporary shelter from wind and rain. A legionnaire forced to sleep without a tent would look for any natural shelter, a tree, a rock, or at least the leeward side of a hill. He would place his scutum on the ground, curved upward. This created a small but effective barrier against the wind. Then he would lie down on the ground, spreading his cloak underneath him, and press himself against the shield. The shield covered his head and torso from the strongest winds. Several soldiers could put their shields together to create more reliable shelter. For example, 2 or 3 shields placed on their edges and joined together formed a small barrier. Soldiers could lie down behind this barrier, covered with their cloaks. This was especially important in steppe or desert areas where there was no natural shelter. The leather cover that the scutum was covered with during marches to protect it from rain also played a role. The shield itself was made of layers of wood glued together and covered with leather. If it got wet all the time, it would split and become useless. The cover protected it, but at night it could be used as extra bedding or shelter. Sleep in such conditions was shallow and restless. Soldiers slept fully clothed, without removing their armor, and kept their weapons close at hand. It was not a full rest, as in camp, but rather a short respite. However, even such a respite was better than no rest at all. Using a shield to protect against the elements was a simple but effective soldier's life hack. Of course, this was an extreme case. Any centurion preferred his men to sleep in the safety of the camp. But the legionaries' ability to adapt to any conditions and use their equipment for purposes other than those for which it was intended was their strong point. They were survival professionals. The shield that saved them from swords during the day saved them from the cold at night. This method was especially important for light units, auxiliaries, or cavalry. They were more mobile than the legions and often operated away from the main forces. They might not have had the time or opportunity to build a proper camp. Therefore, sleeping under the cover of a shield and cloak was more common for them. Imagine a group of Roman scouts somewhere in the forests of Germany. They cannot light a fire for fear of giving themselves away. They cannot pitch tents. They simply lie down on the ground, huddling together for warmth and shielding themselves from the icy wind with their shields. This image vividly demonstrates the harshness of military life. How effective do you think such sleep could be? In the next chapter, we will talk about what else, besides cloaks and shields, helps soldiers keep warm and regain their strength before bedtime. Fires and hot food. Sleeping on an empty stomach is bad sleep. The Roman command understood this perfectly well. Therefore, the evening ritual before bedtime did not begin with going to bed, but with cooking. After the camp was set up and the guards were posted, the soldiers of the contubernarium gathered together at their tent to prepare dinner. This was an important social and physiological moment of the day. The main fuel for the fires was, of course, wood. If the camp was set up in a wooded area, this was not a problem. Special foraging teams collected wood during the march or after the camp was set up. However, in steppe or desert regions, this became a problem. Soldiers had to use dung, dry shrubs, or even dismantle old buildings for fuel. Campfires were not lit haphazardly. There were strict fire safety rules. The fires were located at a safe distance from tents and fortifications. Inside the camp, the smoke from thousands of small fires created a special atmosphere. On the one hand, it was warm and cozy, but on the other hand, the smoke could reveal the location of the camp. So in particularly dangerous areas, the order could be, do not light fires. Each tent had a common pot, a situla. This pot was used to prepare the main meal. The Roman legionnaires' diet was simple but high in calories. It was based on grain, mainly wheat. Each soldier received his ration of grain and ground it into flour himself using a small hand mill, which was carried by the camp mule. The soldiers used this flour to make either unleavened flatbread, baking it on hot stones or a metal sheet, or porridge. The most common dish was pulse, a thick porridge made from coarse flour, water, and salt. They added whatever they could get their hands on, vegetables, beans, garlic, and if they were lucky, a little fat or dried meat. Hot food at the end of an exhausting day was incredibly important. It not only satisfied hunger, but also warmed the soldiers from within. This was especially important in cold climates. Warm porridge, eaten in the company of comrades, restored strength and raised morale. It was a moment of relaxation before bedtime. After dinner, the soldiers tidied up their equipment. They cleaned their armor, sharpened their swords, and repaired their shoes and caligae. It was a routine but necessary task. Performing these simple, monotonous actions also helped them switch from the tension of the march to a state of rest. The camp hummed with quiet conversations, the clanging of metal, and the crackling of fires. Water was another important element. It was brought from the nearest source, which was carefully guarded. Water was boiled for cooking. Soldiers also drank pasca, a mixture of water, vinegar, and sometimes salt. Vinegar disinfected the water and quenched thirst well. This drink was an essential part of the diet. When all the work was done, the food was eaten, and the equipment was put in order, the camp gradually quieted down. The soldiers dispersed to their tents. The fires were extinguished or left to smolder under supervision. It was time for sleep, a soldier's most valuable resource. This routine, repeated day after day, was the foundation of the Roman military machine. This evening ritual, from setting up camp to eating hot soup, was aimed at one thing: ensuring the soldier had the best possible quality and safety of rest. The Romans did not leave such important things to chance. They turned preparation for sleep into an exact science, and this gave them a huge advantage on the battlefield. The entire camp could sleep safely only because some of the soldiers did not sleep. The guard duty system, vigilia, in the Roman army was as strict and organized as everything else. The night was divided into 4 watches, or vigilia, each lasting about 3 hours from sunset to sunrise. This ensured that there were always fresh and alert sentries on the ramparts. Responsibility for guarding the camp was collective. Each centuria assigned a certain number of soldiers to guard duty. It was not the most pleasant duty after a hard day, but it was vital. Refusal to serve or negligence were unthinkable. The lives of thousands of comrades were at stake. The process of changing guards was strictly regulated. The beginning and end of each vigil were announced by the sound of a trumpet, a buccina. It was a deep, drawn-out sound that carried throughout the camp. Hearing it, the new guard took up their weapons and went to their posts, while the old guard, having done their duty, returned to their tents to sleep. The sentries stood at regular intervals along the rampart, usually within sight and earshot of each other. They had to stand motionless, peering and listening into the darkness beyond the camp. Their task was to notice any movement, any suspicious noise, and immediately raise the alarm. They were not allowed to sit down or get distracted. In addition to the sentries on the ramparts, there were also patrols, called circuiters. These were officers, usually centurions or their assistants, who made their rounds throughout the night. They checked the sentry's vigilance. To make sure that the sentry was not asleep, the patrol used a system of passwords. Every day a new password was set, which was passed on to all units in the form of a wooden tablet, a tessera. The sentry, hearing the patrol approaching, had to call out to them and demand the password. The patrol, in turn, made sure that the sentry was in place and awake. This double control system was very effective. It prevented the sentries from relaxing and at the same time protected them from sudden attacks. The consequences of sleeping on duty were severe. If the patrol found the sentry asleep, it was considered one of the most serious military offenses. Such a soldier endangered the entire legion. The punishment was swift and served as a lesson to everyone else. Therefore, soldiers did everything possible to stay alert during their vigil. In cold weather, standing guard was a real challenge. Soldiers stood in the biting wind, snow or rain. They wrapped themselves in their cloaks, but the warmth of a blanket was unavailable. The only thing that kept them warm was their sense of duty and the thought that in 3 hours they would be relieved. Then they could return to their tents and sleep soundly. This round-the-clock vigilance was the price the army paid for its safe rest. Every soldier in the camp was both a defender and someone who was defended. Today he slept while his comrades stood on the rampart, and tomorrow they would switch roles. This system of interdependence and responsibility was the backbone of the legion. Thus, the Roman camp never truly slept. It was a living organism, with one part resting while the other remained awake. It was a perfect balance between rest and vigilance. It was this system that allowed the legions to wake up every morning refreshed, rested, and ready for new challenges, while their enemies were often exhausted from sleepless nights. The Roman Empire stretched from foggy Britain to arid Syria. Legionnaires had to fight and sleep in completely different climatic conditions. The standard sleeping kit, a leather tent and a woolen cloak, was universal but required adaptation. Resourcefulness and adaptability were as important soldierly skills as swordplay. In northern provinces, such as Germany or Britain, the main problem was cold and damp. Winter campaigns were particularly difficult. The leather tent protected against wind and rain, but not against frost. To keep warm, soldiers used their entire arsenal of resources. As we have already mentioned, the floor of the tent was covered with a thick layer of straw, ferns, or fir branches. This bedding insulated them from the frozen ground. The soldiers slept fully clothed, wrapped in their raincoats. 8 people in a cramped tent kept each other warm with their body heat. Sometimes, if it was safe, a small fire could be kept going in or near the tent. However, most often, the only source of warmth was hot food before bed and collective body heat. Extra blankets or skins were worth their weight in gold. In these regions, soldiers could also build more substantial winter camps, called castra stativa. These were no longer temporary overnight stops, but full-fledged fortresses with wooden or even stone barracks. Such barracks already had stoves and wooden bunks, which made sleeping much more comfortable. But on the march, they had to make do with tents. Completely different problems awaited soldiers in the east, in Syria, Judea, or Egypt. Here, the enemy was not the cold, but the heat and dust. During the day, the temperature could be exhausting, and at night, it could drop sharply. During the day, the leather tent turned into a hot oven. Therefore, soldiers often pitched tents but slept next to them in the open air, using the tent only as a storage place for their belongings. At night, when the desert coolness set in, the cloak became necessary again. A hooded penola was especially useful, as it protected the head not only from the cold, but also from the ubiquitous dust and sand carried by the wind. The problem with firewood was even more acute here, so hot food could be a luxury. Water was the most valuable commodity in desert areas. The evening ritual was not so much about warming up as it was about getting one's share of water. Sleep was restless due to the risk of dehydration and night attacks by mobile enemies such as Parthian horsemen. Camps here were built just as carefully, but the emphasis was on protection from sudden cavalry attacks. In mountainous regions such as the Alps or the Balkans, soldiers had to sleep on rocky, uneven ground. It was difficult to find a flat area for a camp. Soldiers had to level the ground for their tents and remove stones. Sleeping on stones was hard, and a thick bed of branches was not a luxury but a necessity. Regardless of the climate, the Roman system worked. It was flexible enough to adapt and at the same time strict enough to maintain order. A soldier who knew how to organize his sleep in the snows of Germany could do so just as effectively in the sands of Syria. He used the same basic principles: collective security, warm shelter, and hot food. This ability to adapt was the secret to the legion's endurance. The empire was built not only with swords, but also with shovels, needles, and woolen cloaks. Every legionnaire who fell asleep in extreme conditions was living proof of this incredible adaptability. The Roman camp was not just a physical shelter. It was a powerful psychological tool. Its influence on the morale of the legionaries and their opponents was enormous. Every detail of camp life, from the evening bugle call to the morning roll call, worked to strengthen the Roman soldier's confidence in himself and his army. For a legionnaire, the camp was synonymous with home. In a foreign, hostile country where an enemy could be hiding behind every tree, the construction of familiar fortifications was a return to civilization. As soon as the last stake was driven into the rampart, the chaos of the outside world remained outside. Inside, order, law, and Roman discipline reigned supreme. This feeling was priceless. Every evening, the soldier saw a fortress rise from nothing before his eyes. It was a daily, routine miracle that demonstrated the power of his legion. He was not just a grain of sand, but part of a well-coordinated mechanism capable of changing the landscape. This involvement in collective power gave him confidence in his own abilities. Sleep in such a camp was the sleep of a victor. The soldier rested not because the enemy graciously gave him a respite, but because he himself had created safe conditions for himself. He slept knowing that his sleep was protected not only by walls, but also by thousands like him. This collective confidence was unbreakable. The predictability of the ritual also played a huge role. Every day, regardless of fatigue or weather, the army performed the same sequence of actions: marching, choosing a location, marking out the camp, building it, preparing food, and sleeping. This routine was an anchor of stability in the changing sea of war. It protected the soldier's psyche from stress and uncertainty. For Rome's enemies, the sight of a night camp was, on the contrary, a powerful demoralizing factor. They saw an army that was not afraid of the night, an army so confident in itself that it built a fortress just to spend the night. Any attempt at a night attack was repelled by the moats and ramparts. This inspired awe and respect. Often, Rome's opponents simply could not understand this obsession with camps. Why waste so much energy every day? But that was precisely the point. The Roman army did not just fight, it carried its order with it. The camp was the physical embodiment of Roman superiority, its organizational and engineering power. When the legion left the camp in the morning, it left behind an empty but impressive structure. These abandoned camps, which can be found throughout Europe, still stand as a testament to their discipline. The army left rested, refreshed, and ready for battle. It did not waste energy on night alarms and sleepless runs. The very act of sleeping in safety was a confirmation of a soldier's status. He was not a savage sleeping under a bush in fear, but a citizen soldier whose rest was guarded by the full power of Rome. This psychology was no less important than physical recovery. The soldier woke up not only with a rested body, but also with a clear head. Thus, the entire system of overnight stays for the Roman army was aimed at creating psychological comfort, security, order, routine, camaraderie. All these were the building blocks of the legion's indestructible fighting spirit. The Roman army defeated its enemies even before the battle began, simply by showing them how it slept. We can see that sleep for Roman soldiers was not just a physiological need, but a crucial element of military strategy. It was sleep protected by moats, ramparts, discipline, and camaraderie. The system of camps, contubernia, and personal equipment turned rest into a ritual that gave Rome a fresh and battle-ready army every morning. A safe night was as much a victory as a battle won. It was the foundation on which the legion's endurance and ability to conquer were built. The Roman army did not just march, it carried its own portable world with it, guaranteeing order and recovery. What other aspects of Roman military or civilian life would you like us to cover in future videos? Perhaps you are interested in supply logistics, winter camps, or the lives of veterans after service? Write your suggestions in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new research into the past.